Millionaire woman dropped a ring at the market. The poor farmer who found it got the surprise of his life. The Saturday morning sun cast long shadows across the bustling riverside farmers market in rural Kentucky. Vendors called out their prices, while customers weaved between stalls overflowing with fresh produce, homemade preserves, and local crafts. The air was thick with the scent of fresh bread and the chatter of small-town life. Margaret Thornfield stepped out of her silver Mercedes, her designer heels clicking against the asphalt. At 62, she was the picture of refined welfare. Pearl necklace gleaming against a navy blazer, her gray hair perfectly styled. She owned 3 textile factories across the state and had more money than most people could spend in several lifetimes. But today, she wasn't here as a businesswoman. She was here because her late husband had loved this market and visiting. It had become her way of staying connected to simpler times. "Mrs. Thornfield," called out Betty Morrison from behind her vegetable stand. "Haven't seen you in a while. How are you holding up?" Margaret smiled warmly. "I'm doing well, Betty. Just thought I'd pick up some of those wonderful tomatoes of yours." As she reached into her purse to pay, Margaret's fingers brushed against her most precious possession, a vintage diamond ring that had belonged to her grandmother. The ring was worth more than most people's houses, but its sentimental value was immeasurable. It was the last piece of jewelry her husband had given her before he passed away 2 years ago. "That'll be $8, dear," Betty said, placing the tomatoes in a brown paper bag. Margaret fumbled with her wallet, not noticing as the ring slipped from her finger and fell silently to the ground, rolling underneath a nearby stall. 3 stalls down, Jake Patterson was arranging his modest display of organic vegetables. At 34, Jake had the weathered hands of someone who'd worked the land his entire life. His flannel shirt was faded but clean, and his jeans bore the honest stains of farm work. He'd inherited his family's small farm when his father died 5 years ago, but keeping it running had been a constant struggle. The bank had already sent 2 foreclosure notices, and Jake was behind on his mortgage by 3 months. "Morning, Jake," called out his neighbor, Tom Fletcher. "How's the farm holding up?" Jake forced a smile. "Oh, one day at a time. The corn's looking good this year, though." What he didn't mention was that he'd been up until 3 a.m. the night before, going over his finances again, trying to figure out how to make the numbers work. The medical bills from his mother's cancer treatment had drained his savings, and even though she'd passed away peacefully 6 months ago, the debt remained. As Jake bent down to retrieve a dropped carrot, something caught his eye, a glint of light reflecting off what looked like a piece of jewelry wedged between 2 crates. He reached underneath and pulled out what was clearly an expensive ring. The diamond was enormous, surrounded by smaller stones in an intricate vintage setting. Jake's heart raced. This ring could solve all his problems. He could pay off the farm, the medical bills, everything. But as he looked around the market, he saw Margaret Thornfield frantically searching through her purse, her face pale with worry. "Excuse me," Jake said, approaching her stall. "Ma'am, are you looking for something?" Margaret looked up, her eyes red with tears. "Yes, I've lost my ring. It's been in my family for generations. My husband gave it to me before he died." "And her voice broke. Jake looked down at the ring in his palm, then back at this elegant woman who was clearly devastated. Every practical part of his brain screamed at him to walk away, to keep the ring, to save his farm. But his father had raised him better than that. "Is this what you're looking for?" Jake asked, extending his hand. Margaret's eyes widened as she saw the ring. "Oh my God, yes. Where did you find it?" "It was under some crates near my stall." "Must have rolled there when you dropped it." Margaret's hands trembled as she took the ring and slipped it back onto her finger. "I can't believe it. I thought I'd lost it forever." "Young man, what's your name?" "Jake Patterson, ma'am." "Jake, I don't know how to thank you. This ring, it means everything to me." Jake shrugged. Just glad I could help. It clearly belongs to someone who loves it." Margaret studied this humble farmer who could have easily kept a fortune, but chose to return it instead. "Please, let me give you a reward. That ring is worth more than you can imagine." "No, ma'am, I couldn't take anything. Just seeing you get it back is reward enough." Margaret insisted, but Jake politely declined every offer. Finally, she pulled out her business card. "At least take this. If you ever need anything at all, you call me." Jake took the card, not really intending to use it. "Thank you, Mrs. Thornfield, but I'll be just fine." As Margaret walked away, she couldn't stop thinking about the farmer who'd returned her ring. There was something about his quiet dignity, the way he'd refused any reward, that reminded her of her own father, a man who'd built his fortune through honest work and treating people right. That evening, Margaret sat in her mansion overlooking the Kentucky River, turning the ring on her finger. She thought about Jake Patterson and wondered about his story. Something in his eyes had suggested he was carrying a heavy burden, yet he'd done the right thing without hesitation. She picked up her phone and called her assistant. "Linda, I need you to do some research for me. There's a farmer named Jake Patterson who was at the Riverside Market today. I want to know everything about him, his situation, his family, his farm. And I want to know by tomorrow morning." Meanwhile, Jake sat at his kitchen table, staring at a stack of bills and foreclosure notices. The bank had called again that afternoon. He had 30 days to come up with $15,000 or lose the farm that had been in his family for 3 generations. He looked at Margaret's business card and shook his head. He'd done the right thing returning that ring, but right now, doing the right thing felt like the most expensive decision he'd ever made. As he went to bed that night, Jake had no idea that his simple act of honesty was about to change his life in ways he could never have imagined. The next morning, Jake was up before dawn as usual, tending to his animals and checking on his crops. The farm might be small and struggling, but it was still his responsibility. He was feeding the chickens when he heard a car coming up the gravel driveway. Jake looked up to see the same silver Mercedes from the market, followed by a black SUV. His stomach dropped. Rich people in expensive cars usually meant trouble for someone like him. Margaret Thornfield stepped out of the Mercedes, but this time she was dressed more casually: jeans, a simple blouse, and comfortable shoes. She looked around the property with the eye of someone who understood hard work and honest living. "Mr. Patterson," she called out, "I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I brought some friends." 3 other people emerged from the SUV. A woman in a business suit carrying a briefcase, a man with a camera, and another woman with a notepad. Jake wiped his hands on his jeans and walked over, confused. "Mrs. Thornfield, what's this about?" Margaret smiled. "Yesterday, you returned something precious to me. Today, I'd like to return the favor. But first, I need to ask you something. Are you about to lose this farm?" Jake's face flushed. How did you ... My assistant did some research. Jake, you're 3 months behind on your mortgage. You owe $15,000, and the bank is foreclosing in 30 days. Is that correct? Jake nodded, too embarrassed to speak. And you have medical bills from your mother's cancer treatment, totaling another $23,000? Yes, ma'am, Jake said quietly. But I don't understand why. Margaret held up her hand. 25 years ago, my husband and I started our business with nothing but a dream and a $1,000 loan. We built it into something successful because we believed in rewarding good people. Yesterday, you proved you're one of the good ones. She gestured to the woman with the briefcase. This is Sarah Chun, my attorney. Sarah, show him the paperwork. Sarah opened her briefcase and pulled out several documents. Mr. Patterson, Mrs. Thornfield would like to pay off your mortgage in full, eliminate your medical debt, and establish a trust fund for the ongoing maintenance and improvement of your farm. Jake stared at the papers, unable to process what he was hearing. I can't accept this. It's too much." "You can and you will," Margaret said firmly. "But there's more. I own 3 textile factories, and I've been looking for someone to manage our new agricultural supply division. We need someone who understands farming, someone with integrity. The position pays $90,000 a year, plus benefits." Jake felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. "Mrs. Thornfield, I don't understand. Why would you do all this?" Margaret's eyes grew misty. "Because 30 years ago, I was in a similar situation. My husband and I were about to lose everything when a stranger helped us out. He said something I'll never forget. Sometimes the universe tests us to see if we're ready for the blessings it wants to give us. You passed that test yesterday." The man with the camera stepped forward. "I'm David Walsh from the Louisville Courier-Journal. Mrs. Thornfield called us because she wanted to share your story. She believes acts of kindness should be celebrated." Jake looked around at all these people, still struggling to believe this was real. "But the ring ... I just did what anyone would do." "No," Margaret said. "You did what you would do. And that makes all the difference. Most people would have kept that ring. It's worth $400,000. Jake's knees nearly buckled. $400,000? And you gave it back without hesitation. You didn't even ask what it was worth." Sarah handed Jake a pen. "All we need is your signature on these documents. The mortgage company has already been contacted, and they're waiting for the wire transfer." Jake's hands shook as he signed the papers. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep being the good man you are," Margaret replied. "Say you'll help us build something special with this agricultural division. And say you'll remember that sometimes doing the right thing is the most important thing you can do." As Jake signed the last document, he thought about his father, who'd always said that honesty was the best investment a man could make. He thought about his mother, who'd taught him that what goes around comes around. And he thought about how a simple decision to return a lost ring had changed everything. "There's one more thing," Margaret said. "I'd like to establish a scholarship in your name at the University of Kentucky's Agricultural College for students who demonstrate both academic excellence and moral character." Jake finally broke down and cried. "Mrs. Thornfield, I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You already have," she said, patting his shoulder. "Every day, just by being who you are." 6 months later, Jake stood in his newly renovated farmhouse, looking out at fields that were more productive than they'd ever been. The agricultural division he managed was thriving, helping other small farmers access better markets and resources. The scholarship had already helped 12 students pursue their dreams in agriculture, but the best part was the letter he'd received. That morning from a young woman in Ohio, she'd read about his story in the newspaper and had decided to return a lost wallet she'd found instead of keeping the money. She wrote, "Your story reminded me that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it." Jake smiled as he read the letter. Margaret had been right. Sometimes the universe tests us to see if we're ready for the blessings it wants to give us. But more than that, sometimes one person's decision to do the right thing can inspire others to do the same. As the sun set over his thriving farm, Jake Patterson realized that finding that ring had been the luckiest day of his life. Not because of the reward it brought, but because it had reminded him that in a world that often seemed cold and hard, kindness and honesty still had the power to change everything. Margaret Thornfield had given him more than money. She'd given him hope. And now, every day, Jake tried to pass that hope along to someone else, just as his father had taught him, just as Margaret had shown him, and just as he hoped others would do long after his own story was forgotten. Because sometimes, the most valuable thing you can return to the world isn't a lost ring. It's the faith that good people still exist, and that doing the right thing still matters. The end.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.